Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Starting Your Science of Reading Shift with Screening, How to Use Assessment Data as a Building Block for MTSS. My name is Victoria, and I'm a marketing manager here at Amplify. Today's webinar will be recorded, and we'll email out the recording link for you to rewatch as you'd like, and everyone here with us today will also receive a certificate of attendance. We have a live captioner here with us, so if you want to access those captions, please click on Live Transcript in the bottom tray. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A and we will try to get to them at the end. We welcome comments in the chat, and I'd love to hear where everyone is joining us from and what your role in education is. And just a quick note too, that we are hosting an entire week of literacy data webinars as part of our first ever literacy data takeover week. Tomorrow we have a really exciting lineup. We have two webinars for you. Dr. Tim Shanahan will be joining us to present on how to move away from leveled readers. And we also have a special presentation by our own Alestra Flores Menendez and Kajal Patel Bilo to present differentiating with the science of reading, supporting multilingual English learners. To find out about the other webinars in this series and watch recordings of the past ones, please visit amplify.com/data takeover week. Now, I'm very excited to introduce Sarah McCarty, who is joining us today to present on starting your science of reading shift with screening. Sarah is an experienced educator with a passion for fostering student growth and success in reading. She has a master's degree in curriculum and instruction from St. Mary of the Woods College in Indiana. She taught in the elementary school sector, provides literacy tutoring services now to students in grade K-3, and has been part of our Amplify team for 12 years. Sarah says that using data to drive instruction is her jam. Hi, Sarah. How are you today? We're so happy to have you with us.
I am well. Thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you for everyone for joining us today. I'm excited to start here and be with you on this journey. As I've worked in a school district who used data as their starting point and had data walls. And I actually saw some folks in the chat that I actually was an educator partner with. So it feels really good. I kind of feel like I'm at home, even though I'm here in my office in Utah. So it's great to see everyone. So I think we'll just get started. And I will say lots of resources are going to be shared. So if you love resources, you're in the right session. And if you love free resources, shout out to that as well. So we're going to start with universal screening data because it's the root to me of why we do what we do, why change is important when we think about the shifts to the science of reading. We're going to talk about the multi-tiered system of support framework, as well as other frameworks that you're familiar with, the simple view of reading, the research behind that. We're going to talk about Scarborough's Reading Road, the response to intervention, what healthy systems look like, and just grounding us in those good frameworks that we know are tried and true. And then the science of reading resources will be shared. So get ready to capture all that good information, but also know that we will be following up with you through email with this recording and video with all the resources. So why universal screening is our starting point. Here is just a lay of the land. Where are we at as a country? So we can see that across the country, there's been a plethora of policy put into place for state screening. We see some states here that have just universal screening laws in place. Some states just have dyslexia screening laws, but the majority of states across our country at the policy level now have both dyslexia and universal screening laws, which makes starting your shift to the science of reading with your screening data like an ideal starting point, right? Because that's going to be part of our why. So here's just a roadmap that we've put together for our conversation today. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what universal screening data says, why it can create that call to action. I'm going to share out just two district stories with you today. I would love for you to utilize the chat. You may have a different district story, but there's almost 1,000 educators and leaders here today, and it's important to connect with each other. Just to say hey, I'm not alone, or hey, I've been in your situation, let's share emails and connect. So think about today as also a remote community. We're also going to shift and talk about the science of reading, like developing that within our staff. That is something that I experienced actually after I left teaching, was the shift to the science of reading. So I didn't actually get to experience that when I was a teacher. I came from a balanced literacy district. So I may be walking in the shoes of many of you that are here today. And then we'll talk about selecting programs that are grounded in the science of reading. And we'll share some tips and tricks there. So would love to hear from you, like thinking about this, where are you? Do you have a universal screener in place? Like maybe you already have something that's grounded in the science of reading. Or are you maybe in year one of that journey because you're under like state policy and you had to make a different shift to a different screener? Maybe you're actually in this middle column of science of reading and developing that knowledge within your team. Drop that here. And it's also just good to know, like, hey, we're actually further along in this journey. And we're over here on the far right side where we're reevaluating and monitoring the programs that we wrap around our students that we're utilizing that are grounded in the science of reading. Take a moment, drop that in here. It's always awesome to see where different folks are in this journey. I'm going to start us off with response to intervention, what a healthy system looks like when we look at our universal screening data. One of the best places to start is like, hey, when we review our universal screening data, we should have 80% of our students reading proficiently, ready for core instruction. When we look at a healthy system, our universal screening data should say we should have around 15% of our students who need some type of support, small group, tier 2, moderate intervention. And in a healthy system, we only have 5% of our students in that most at-risk need, where they're receiving all tiers of instruction. So again, I'm going to say healthy system, thinking about response to intervention. Are we here? If you're here, that is amazing. That's a great place to be at. It helps with your journey. If you're not here, you're not alone. And so I hope that you take away some amazing resources as you're working with staff on getting to this healthy journey place with your student data. So I've just tried to make all the visuals here when I talk about universal screening data very simple for our conversation today. So whether you're using like MCLASS DIBELS 8, whether you're using DIBELS 8th edition like paper pencil, whether you're utilizing maybe Acadian's Reading, the prior, which is also formerly known as DIBELS Next, maybe you're using NWEA, FastBridge, Star Reading, like I love assessment data. So I've tried to make it simple regardless of what you're using when we're having these conversations today. And I've also grounded us here with the image of the response to intervention of like, what is a healthy system? So our data should tell us it should answer these two questions. What's happening with our students? We're going to break that down into two categories. And it also tells us how effective is the instruction, whether it be instructional strategies, instructional programs. It's answering those two questions. So first is like students. I want to break students down into the categories of student proficiency and student progress over time. That's going to help when you're setting the vision for your district of why we're starting with our universal screening data to make all these shifts. So we know that students in a healthy system, we should have 80% of them reading at or above benchmark when we look at our universal screening data. If in a healthy system we have that allows us as educators to really provide targeted instruction to those at-risk students where we can adjust instruction, think about the duration, the intensity, progress monitor, making sure students are moving forward, because I only have a few students thinking about this top part of this triangle on the right to really hone in to change their instructional needs that they may need. The second part of students that I like to think about in a healthy system using universal screening data is that of the 80% who are reading at grade level, that 95% of those students remain reading at grade level over time. So student progress. So from kindergarten to first grade to second grade, every year within our system, we are maintaining in a healthy system 95% of those students who are at or above benchmark, because that tells us that our core instruction is effective. The programs that we're wrapping around are grounded in the science of reading. All starts right here. So at Amplify, we are the single and only provider of the MClass digital platform where the DIBELS 8th assessment sits on that digital platform where teachers can assess students digitally. It is aligned to the science of reading because it's assessing those key foundational literacy skills. The assessment of DIBELS 8 is authored by our partners here at Amplify, the University of Oregon. This is an assessment for students in grades K through 6 when using the MClass platform. You may be using the paper pencil form through the DIBELS data system, which is K8. The beauty of this assessment, I'm going to go back to the beginning of our conversation, is that it is validated as a universal screener and a dyslexia screener as a standalone assessment. So thinking about policies that have been put into place, this is a very strong, valid, reliable assessment that districts choose to continue to utilize because they trust the scientific evidence and the research and the teaching and learnings that this assessment has been based on for decades. I started off as a DIBELS 6.0 user in our school district. I am a big fan of what the data tells us, and I use it still currently when I tutor students in my community here by assessing them because it's benchmark progress monitoring, and I can adjust the instruction accordingly based off of those key skills and indicators that are part of the research behind the DIBELS 8th assessment. And so I'm going to talk about universal screening data from districts that I've supported here at Amplify for the past 12 years. I'm going to give two scenarios because I feel like many of us here on this call today, and again, it doesn't matter what universal screener you're utilizing, this data is like easy to digest for our conversation. Would love to hear from you too. Like, hey, I have the same experience. I've been there. This data looks familiar. Or I've actually had the opposite. And here's some things that we've utilized to change the trajectory of student outcomes. So here was a district. There's two slides here. It's going to start at the very beginning of the student journey, which is kindergarten. This is just showing beginning of year to middle year and the snippet here for our conversation. But their end of year was beautiful, right? These are kindergarten students. They were receiving full day kindergarten all day, every day. And they were what I would say are like caterpillars to butterflies. We can see where we start with the percent of students at the beginning of year who are proficient. We see positive student proficiency. And at the end of the year, it was beautiful, right? We loved what we saw with our kindergarten instruction and student outcomes in this district when we looked at kindergarten. However, 1 year later, this was the story in this district. And so what was happening was, as students were to be mastering phonemic awareness, phonological awareness skills, the basic skills of phonics, more advanced decoding phonics, right? Like long E, two vowels go walking, R controlled vowels. What was happening was we could see, and I'm just going to say, like we could see in the universal screening data that students were not able to receive the instruction that they needed in order to continue that positive growth. We actually grew the gap here in first grade in this district, and then the gap actually continued when we looked over time. So this district, this was their call to action. They did not have that second component that we talked about earlier, the student outcomes, and therefore it's not acceptable. We need to do something different. This is 2 years worth of data in a K-5 district. This is beginning to end of year, a complete flipped model. Very challenging for educators because all of these students needed core instruction. All of these students, for the most part, needed tier 2 and tier 3. Like it was a major call to action. And so if you're experiencing, maybe those were just two examples that I'm sharing, would love to see what's in the chat here in a little bit. Like that's our call to action. That's why starting with your universal screening data to make the shifts to the science of reading is so, in a sense, like easy, right? The data is not lying. It doesn't matter what screener you're using. If we don't have that healthy system of 80% of our students at or above proficiency, and then we're not maintaining 95% of them with core instruction year over year over year, it's time to make a change, right? We're here for our students. And so believe it or not, in some of the districts And you may be walking in these footsteps today, but like they have to sell their problem. Like they had to sell that this data is not okay, sadly. But selling that problem is like unemotional in a sense because the data is not lying. These are the students. Here's how they're performing with reading, and we want to make a change. I'm going to ground us here with MTSS so that when we move forward in our conversations here, we're grounded with this model. So at a very high level, MTSS has 4 key components. We have screening, which many states, many of you here today will have a screener already in place based off of the landscape at the policy level. There's progress monitoring. Monitoring of the student's instruction, yes, but we're also monitoring how we're doing on this journey of the shift. We're monitoring like the programs that we put in place to support students and that teachers are using. So we're monitoring, we have screening, and MTSS is also a multi-level prevention system, right? It's proactive, it's preventative. We want to have that healthy system where we know that our core is teaching all those explicit literacy skills and building rich knowledge for our students so that we don't end up with a flipped model, right? The heart of this is really the database decisions. I heard a senator recently just speak last week, actually, when I was in the Midwest, where he actually said, we looked at the data and that's why we're putting this new policy out there. Love to hear that it was a database decision, even at the state level. Database decisions for like what data within our elementary world or middle school world are we using when we do PLCs? What data are we using and looking at to select different programs or that we're going to abandon something, right? All at the heart are all database decisions. Database decisions for collaborating with our peers within our buildings, our special ed teachers, our gen ed teachers, the coach, the interventionist, the principals, our parents. Database decisions when we talk to our students about their data, right? Like, here's why you're going to see so-and-so for intervention. Because when I looked at your data, I could see that we need to build up that phonics for you. So we're having even database decisions with our students. It gives meaning to what we're doing with them with the instruction. And so keeping this at the heart of our work. One thing that I found, I read the Reading League. I've read this defining guide many times, but I pulled it back out when I was preparing for this webinar with you today. Because on page 20, let me open it up here. Let's see here, page 26. It has this quote that I've actually put here on the screen that I found extremely powerful. That MTSS is a comprehensive system whereby ineffective practices are strategically abandoned and proven practices are prioritized. And that just, for me, really hit home differently. It may be hitting home to you as well differently. Like, think about ineffective practices of that we know are debunked, like 3 queuing strategies. That is ineffective, and we need to strategically abandon it. And we need to prioritize proven practices. And the proven practices are the science of reading, things that are grounded in the evidence of the science of reading. So if you haven't checked this out, it'll be part of our resources today that you'll get as a follow-up, and it's a free download, the Reading League Defining Guide. I also just want to say, in this journey, when you start with your universal screening data to shift to the science of reading and then reevaluate your programs, it's going to take time. Everyone's on a different journey. There's a resource. Let me see here. Here we go. There's this little resource that we have here at Amplify that will walk you through different implementation stages, and you can see different timelines. So if you're at the beginning of this journey, and what does this look like? How much time are we going to need to make these shifts? Check out this resource that our team will provide you. All right, we're back here at our roadmap. I'm going to just take a moment. We have talked about universal screening, like why or how to help you start that as your why when you're making this shift. Curious to just kind of pop in here and see. Oh, I love that comment, Amy. My son loved it when the teachers and the interventionists showed him his data. it's really powerful, right? It gives them that reason of like why I'm doing what I'm doing, and that's important to help them. Thank you for sharing all these. Okay, I don't see anything powerful at this point that I'm going to take a moment to address and continue to welcome all of you that are joining us. We're going to shift to like the fun, what I call the fun part of our webinar today, like how to get these resources, or what are these resources when we think about the science of reading. And before I start showing those and the chat starts blowing up with our friends here at Amplify that are going to be dropping those resources in the chat, I do want to say this. It's important that we're all working together. Building capacity, singing from the same sheet of music, making sure that we're aligned is another step in this journey. So district sets our vision. We're starting with what we know about our student outcomes with the universal screening data. What's it saying about our students? What is it saying about our instruction? District is going to start that. There's going to be a district leadership team. Then the district is going to help school leaders create school level teams. We're also going to then partner with our teachers. I'm a teacher at heart here. So we have classroom teacher teams, so a full first graded team, and then we have vertical teams within our buildings, right? Our K, our first, second, third, maybe it's a 6, maybe it's a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 school. Like we have building level teams, teacher level teams, right? Because our destination is for our students. We are all working together in this shift because we care about the instruction that we're delivering to our students. We care that it's grounded in the science of reading, and we care that about their outcomes, right? We want them to be readers. And so if we're not working in that alignment to be singing from the same sheet of music, it's going to be very bumpy and challenging. So the first thing I would advise, and you'll see this on many like frameworks, is like creating these teams. One resource that I came across actually came out of the Ohio DOE. And we'll share this here as well, but like it outlines all the topics that we're going to discuss today, but it has the who columns. And I thought some of us, I like concrete resources, like who are on my district level teams, who are part of my building school level teams, who are on my teacher level teams, and when are we going to start talking about this particular resource or this particular time of instruction. When are we going to start those conversations with each of those 3 teams, and when should they be wrapped up? That way, we can kind of chart when we think about planning that. It's a great resource that we're covering our bases, that we've talked about all these critical components, but you could take this resource and make it your own for your own state. Just thought I'd put that out there because it was a free resource, and it really honed in on the why of the professional learnings. So here comes all the great science of reading. So I'm going to kind of break this down into like what to read, what to listen to, what to explore, what to watch. We all have different ways of absorbing information. My number 1 start is The Knowledge Gap by Natalie Wexler. This will give you a better understanding of what the science of reading does and does not look like. You could host a book study within your district for your building level teams. There's a link here to a discussion guide to help drive that engagement for this particular science of reading resource. Additionally, what to read are the Amplify Science of Reading primers. These are free. They will provide you a crash course. I have both of them here in my office. Love, love, love these. But what I love about them is that they're easy to absorb. So for example, if I am a secondary principal and I come down into the elementary world, or a secondary teacher and I'm now in the elementary world, the science of reading and understanding, I'm just going to focus on one component, like the simple view of reading. It's very simplified in the crash courses of these primers that Amplify has published. And you can see here that it talks about understanding when you think about the simple view of reading, like one of the components of the word recognition side, if I don't know what these symbols represent as far as the speech sound and the structure of them together, I can't read, even if I can speak the language orally. And so I just find these just to be a powerful resource. There was one district that I worked with here in Utah. And so here's an example of how to apply these in some of your building levels, like system support teams. She started for the first semester, all of her principal meetings with a snippet of these primers. She might assign like, hey, read 5 pages before you come. And again, I'll just open the book at a different spot. These are simple reads, right? But it's very powerful to help ground her building level principles in what the science of reading is. And then they would start every principal meeting for that first semester with that topic, just to continue the embedded PD and coaching of what the science of reading is. So you can download those are for free. Okay, what to listen to? Sold a Story, the APM reports. This is a 6-series podcast. They're about 50 minutes in length. Super powerful. These are from educators. You're going to hear from parents. You're going to hear from students. You're going to hear from some of those as adults that were not taught how to read, who learned to read. It's very powerful, but this is a very key podcast, I would say, in understanding where some of these instructional habits came from and why we need to break them. And so check out that particular podcast. I would also say here at Amplify, we have the Science of Reading podcast. You can hear firsthand from others around our nation that are making the shift, and they're in various stages of making the shift. So check out those. Those, again, are free podcast. And back again, the reading link, the defining guide. You can download a free copy. Simple, kind of a crash course, again, of like myths and facts. You'll also find Scarborough's reading rope, simple view of reading. What else is in here? Stakeholder information, the Defining Movement Coalition. Again, a great resource to add to your topics of discussion for working with your staff as you make the shift. Amplify provides a Science of Reading professional development. We'd love to continue partnering with you. So if you're looking for this type of PD where we can support you, we're happy to work with you on getting this aligned and set up in your district. All right, we're moving forward. So it was like, if we fast forward in time, right? If I'm starting here today with my universal screening as setting the foundation of the why we're going to make the shift, and then we've had our time to train our staff on the science of reading and what it is, we're going to think about the programs that we're wrapping around our students, thinking about MTSS, like making those database decisions and monitoring programs, thinking of 2 of those components, so that that third component of are we being proactive and preventative is in place. So let's kind of shift over here to the right with programs. So through your exploration and your professional development, this will become very evident that reading does not come naturally to us. So like we're born as humans with some innate abilities, while others require explicit instruction and deliberate practice. And that's reading. It just doesn't occur naturally. So you'll find that the 2 of these skills here with a simple view of reading, language comprehension, and word recognition, literally they have to concert together in order for our students to be skilled readers. And so here at Amplify, so like the Scarborough's reading, and then in grade 3, it becomes integrated with the skilled reading. So a quick highlight here is that starting at the top with language comprehension, this is what we call knowledge within CKLA, where students are listening to complex read alouds, building their oral comprehension and vocabulary while being immersed to the world around them and gaining that information through the various domains. At the bottom is word recognition of the reading rope. That is what we call our skills strand, where students, it's a sounds-based approach, sounds-first approach, where students are working with phonemic awareness, there's handwriting, vocabulary, spelling, grammar, and through daily practice, students become aware that of the connection between reading and writing. When we get to 3rd grade, it becomes integrated, where we're weaving all of those skills and the knowledge into one strand for grades 3 through 5. So the heart of CKLA is really the program design that is grounded in the research of those 2 skills that then become integrated starting in grade 3. Again, more resources for you. So If you like to watch, we have some videos, we have educator panels and webinars. They're linked here. You can hear from educators who have walked this journey from making a shift from a balanced literacy program to utilizing and implementing Amplified CKLA in their districts. What to read. I'm actually going to escape this and show this resource because as an educator, I think I would be super thirsty for this resource. There are 5 components when thinking about this PDF breaks down like 5 components of true science of reading. So the things to look for here, why it's important, why are using decodable readers and not leveled readers important? How that you'll know if you're a coach joining us today or someone who does observations or a principal, like if it's the true science of reading when you're doing like observations and walkthroughs and supporting teachers, and what you're going to be shifting away. Last but not least, there's more resources here that are hyperlinked within this PDF. Like this is one I didn't showcase today, the Margaret Goldberg and Lainey Mednick, the What Should We See in Classrooms resource. 2, provide all students with dedicated phonics instruction and not mini lessons. Again, why it's important, what it looks like, and what you're moving away, and another free resource for you. 3, how to help students with phonics-based scaffolds. Like, what does the science of reading say? We're not going to be doing 3Qing and word guessing, and why is listed there. This is another podcast by Emily Hanford. She also authored the Sold a Story, APM Reports. If you haven't listened to this, it's a great podcast as well to add to your list of resources. 4, teach content, right? Not isolated comprehension strategies. That is the knowledge side, that language comprehension side of the reading rope. Again, here's some key components of what it looks like and why it's important. And the 5th one here is the follow a clear instructional path, not choose your own adventure model. Explicit, sequential, systematic, why that's all important. And here's a key resource for you as well. So lots of goodies today. All right. Also, what to review. Check out the Knowledge Matters campaign. Check out Ed Reports when you're thinking about putting curriculum into place within your districts. I've linked here the Ed Reports that you can read on all curriculums that have been reviewed by them, as well as reading additional research about Amplified CKLA. It's all linked here for you. So if we fast forward in time, I'm going to say you did it, right? You did it. You've conquered that vertically aligned literacy suite. It is grounded in the science of reading. But it's really a long-term journey. Something I want to share with you as well that I recently heard from a district leader was they said when they were going out for core, they in the past had done adoption committees. That's very familiar. As an educator, I sat on an adoption committee one year. You probably have too. But they were looking at it from a different lens. They decided instead of having a short-term adoption committee, that they would embed at the beginning of their journey what they call a literacy and advisory committee. So that is a long-term committee that will continue to support their work and your work if you choose to kind of think of it from that lens of MTSS. Are all those components in place in our district? Do we have a healthy system with our universal screening data? What is it saying about our student outcomes and instruction? And so when they go to select programs, this advisory and literacy committee is very much grounded in this rich information versus a short-term team that just has a short-term assignment. And then once the selection is made, what's happening with supporting that work that we're doing? So think of it from a different lens as you're going on this journey. I'm going to close this out with two more resources that we'll share with you and then open it up to some Q&A. This is a multi-tiered system of support and literacy principles. All of these components here we've covered today with starting our journey with number 7 with the universal screening data. And I would just say as we wrap up this presentation part, things sometimes are going to feel bumpy on this journey for change. We're creatures of habit, right? I get comfortable in my ways of doing things, and sometimes it can be challenging. People are going to want to hit the panic button. People are going to want to throw in the towel. So sometimes I think the best way to prevent this is to kind of keep yourselves grounded as leaders and teachers and understanding why we started this journey. It was about our student outcomes. Like that's where we start, and we want to change those, right? Because our students are our destination here. We want to take time to plan different timelines you're going to see in that change management guide. Some people are on a 2-year, some are on a 5, some are on an 8-year. Like, think about your plan, think about the size of your district, think about what do your staff know? Is it going to take a long time to make the shift? Or maybe you've already been implementing PD around the science of reading. So your timeline might not be as long as others. I would also say train your staff deeply. It's critical that we're all aligned on what the evidence says and what our vision is, and that we're all deeply on board for that. And I would lastly say, fully implement, like, don't short yourself as a leader, don't short your teachers, and definitely don't short your students. So implement fully before throwing the towel in. Because remember, like, our goal here in the planning and implementation stages is that we're monitoring MTSS. We're monitoring how we're going across this journey and how we're putting all these pieces together. So if things aren't happening the way that as a leader or teacher you feel they should, like, have those conversations, understand the why. Did we get off track with our plan? Maybe. Where at? Okay, let's talk about it. Did we leave out like critical staff to train? Maybe we did. Maybe we didn't involve some cohort of SPED teachers, or we only did this in K2 and then we have to repeat, we need to come back around and do 3.5 or 3.6, or the upper middle school, and we're at a different journey now with secondary versus elementary. So thinking about our staff, also thinking about the long-term plan for staff. Staff change grades. How are we going to continue to support them when they change grades? Secondary people come down to elementary. Wow, that's a big shift. Like, what does that look like in our long-term plan to support them, so that we don't have people only implementing a tiny bit of what we want here when we're on our journey? Because ultimately, like, the outcome, again, I'll say it, is our students. So I'm going to share with you a short little video, and I would love to hear from you in your transformation story, where you're at. We love to highlight schools and teachers and students. We have videos about students who talk about what my reading experience was before and what my experience is now. So we'd love to hear from you, but let's take a moment here to hear from some others around our nation who have walked this path with you.
Every year, there was a handful of students, there were a handful of kids that I just couldn't reach, no matter what I did.
What I noticed specifically for my English language learners was that reading was not a natural process for them.
Only 53% of our students were at the proficient benchmark level and above benchmark.
More than 50% of our students scoring below benchmark.
A huge population, 20% of our kids are dyslexic, and they're leaving us not reading.
And what we realized is we had many inconsistencies, but the one thing that was consistent was that our literacy data was not good and we were stagnant.
I always felt that I could do it differently.
I was furious that I wasn't taught the science.
It's like, I wish I had known this my whole life, because it would have changed everything about me.
All of a sudden, I was kind of like, what am I going to do?
Deficits does not mean defeated.
How are we going to fix it?
We're trying to understand and unlock why students weren't on target.
Because it's not the students that need to change their learning habits, it's me that needs to learn how to change what I'm teaching so that the students can grasp what I'm trying to help them learn. 'Cause 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 'c
the piece that brings such joy to my heart, and I'm going to maybe get emotional, but we have seen so many kids that would not have grown, grow and become fluent and able readers.
I got 79% of our students above beyond level. They did it.
And they're able to increase their fluency. They're able to read words quicker.
So they're able to access that code faster, and they're able to read more simple and complex words.
It's awesome to see, you know, teachers having conversations about, wow, I noticed that your kids in your class are specifically strong in this area. So what is it that you're doing?
Being able to explain to them very explicitly why English is this way and why it sounds this way, their little light bulbs start flying, and it's incredible.
When I talk about that science of reading with my students, I provide them a pathway to become risk takers without the fear of failing.
It's not just about the curriculum, it's about the science behind how people, how children, how we as humans learn to read. It's working. I wish I had had this years ago. I wish I had known.
We are finally closing that gap.
We take ourselves to a new level of self-worth through reading.
And my biggest reason for shifting is because I see that it works.
So, wow, very powerful. I think I would just love to hear your reason for your shift. Like, love to hear from you. Why this is so important. And then Victoria, I would just kind of pass it back to you as we like check in the chat for their reasons.
Yeah, people are chatting right now. This was amazing, Sarah. Thank you so much. I just want to mention, I know that our links that we've been sharing aren't working. It's an internal error. We're working on it. Promise we'll have those to you in an email coming in the next 24 hours. Thank you so much for your patience, and we really apologize for the inconvenience with that. But yeah, looks like people are sharing some amazing like sentiments here. Jessica said, every student has the right to be proficient, and we have the tools and resources now to do it. That's so amazing. We do have some questions in the Q&A. So if you'd like to stay on, Sarah can try and answer those. If you're ready, Sarah, I can read off some questions to you.
Yeah.
All right.
So them here. I'm sorry to interrupt, Victoria. If I can't answer them here, can we capture like their email, and I will take some time to get them. I will take time to get you an answer. Great. So if I can't answer it live, I will find you an answer and get back to you.
Amazing. Yeah, so Amy's asking, can you provide an authority to support the 80-15-5 diagram? I want to suggest it at my district with citation.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the response to intervention, and I don't have it right here at my fingertips, but Amy, I will definitely email that to you 100%.
All right. We have a couple questions about like 6-8 students in high school. You know, at Amplify, we don't offer like a screener. Well, M-Class does go to K6. But is there any advice or insight you could offer about that, Sarah?
Well, you know, I would say I get this question a lot. So I'll start there. You're not alone. I think it's an area that as an education field to really tap into, especially post-COVID, right? Like so many students got behind and now they've progressed. They're older, they're in secondary. I will share that we have a lot of upper grade teachers using like the paper pencil form of DIBELS to progress monitor in those precursor skills, not per se the benchmark, but their progress monitoring. Like, did the student ever solidify maybe a 4th grade reading accurately and fluency, like accuracy and fluency. And so you could progress monitor off grade level. And then even within that, you could progress monitor even an upper grade student with like a 3rd grade nonsense word fluency, the phonics strand, because that particular skill will break down like CVC, long vowels, our controlled vowels. It gets more complex in the PM form, just to give you an instructional starting point. And again, I would just say that's a need for this field is upper grade foundational assessments, because oftentimes we've made that shift to standards-based and we still have students that aren't reading, and your heart is in the right place because you want to know where they're at in order to provide the additional instruction that they need. So thank you for asking that.
Thing. Rhonda's asking, do you consider tier 3 to primarily be special ed students, or does tier 3 happen before a special ed referral?
You know, I think that oftentimes varies within a district and district guidance. But you could be a red student, but not necessarily have, you know, an IEP or a 504. I've definitely seen that in the districts that I've supported. But again, it just depends on how your district is using the universal screening data for those most at-risk students. But I will say that most at-risk students do need all 3 tiers of instruction, because the percentage of the likelihood for them to come out of that big gap that they have is hard, and it takes time. So they would definitely need all 3 tiers of instruction. So I would consult with how your districts have different policies on whether that qualifies for special ed or 504s, et cetera.
Great. Joy is asking, in M class, how do you know if a child is being flagged for dyslexia? And what does a teacher do if a child is flagged for dyslexia?
Really good question. So there's a couple things I would say. You can have, I would like to capture her email, but we offer guidance of what key skills. There's a white paper actually that's embedded in the slide deck on the MClass Doubles 8 slide that talks about, from the authors, what key skills you're looking at when a child is most at risk, including those risks that are associated with dyslexia. So that white paper from the University of Oregon will be my #1 reference. The second thing is, if you're using MClass with Doubles 8, we do offer additional screening measures that are called rapid automized naming, also known as RAN, MClass spelling. If students are assessed with those 2 additional measures and they are read on their composite score and they are read on either RAN or spelling, they will have that little risk indicator in the classroom web reporting as well as in our aggregate reporting. And then we also provide in that white paper what to do instructionally, right? Like, now that I know that the student is most at risk for additional reading difficulties, including those associated with dyslexia, here are the key foundational skills for areas of instruction.
Great. We have a question about making this work for non-native English speakers, specifically in middle school science, but we're mainly focused on literacy right now, but just talk about non-native English speakers and how we can support them.
Yeah, absolutely. We do offer MClass Lectura. It is a Spanish assessment. So I don't want to make a broad statement that the non-native English speakers are coming from a Spanish background, but we do offer Spanish in K6. That assessment is MClass Lectura. We support a variety of models of understanding, like, when do I assess students with the English assessment and the Spanish, or at the same time, and also providing educators with a dual language report to help understand, like, what are they proficient in within Spanish and what are they proficient in within English, and how to bridge that gap instructionally so that we can value them being bilingual as an asset. So if that English, non-English speaking is Spanish, reach out to us. We'd be happy to talk to you about that assessment. It also has dual language reporting and instructional activities in both languages to support teachers who are supporting those students.
Great. I think Lauren posted some information about MClass Lectura in the chat, so feel free to check that out. Alice is asking, should all teachers be progress monitoring around the same time? I know it's recommended to do on day 7 of the burst lessons.
Yeah, so they must be using MClass intervention. Yes. So I'm going to start at a high level first with, like, progress monitoring, regardless of what assessment universal screener you're using. It's based off of the student's area of need. So if you could have an overall score of a child who looks good on the surface, right? A green composite score, but they may have yellow submeasures. And so most authors would say some risk, meaning below benchmark or yellow in most systems. I'm going to say that broadly, most systems. You would progress monitor them every 2 to 4 weeks within that literacy area. Most at-risk students, most authors would say, we need to keep a pulse on them closely. They are really at risk. They are red. And so you would check in with them every week to every 2 weeks. Again, progress monitoring in the area of additional instruction. Now, if you're using M-Class intervention, it's already built in. It lets the teachers know between day 7 and 10 to do a progress monitoring, and it lets the educator or leader of the M-Class intervention group know what literacy skill or skills to do a progress monitoring within in order to generate the next 10 days of fully scoped and sequenced lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great question. Okay.
Ryan is asking, with the new state standard first grade stating that students need to be able to decode decodable text, ORF is not as vital. The ORF passages currently on the assessment are not decodable. We are just wondering if this will continue to be part of the M-Class testing protocol moving forward. You can also email a response if you'd prefer.
No, actually, I would say a couple of things. I'd love to address this one. I would say the first thing to check out is the admin and scoring guide that is authored by the University of Oregon. We can provide that, is it Ryan? To Ryan via email, and it will talk about the purpose behind the oral reading fluency. Because you're right, it's not a decodable. It is like grade level text, and we're measuring in that the student's accuracy and the student's fluency. However, we can see within an ORF what students are struggling in. Are they struggling with multisyllabic words? Are they struggling with the basic phonics components or more advanced components that are measured by that phonics assessment of nonsense word fluency? So I would say the best resource to help understand that is an importance of oral reading fluency is the admin and scoring guide.
Great.
Yeah.
Julie is asking, we know the science reading best practices for K2 and intervention. There are lots of resources in this area. Could you give some guidance on tier 1, what we should see guides in for grades 3-5 that are simple and clear?
Oh, wow. I would say maybe Victoria, like I'm going to lean in here. I'm thinking maybe like the knowledge matters, like some of the key components within ed reports. What are you thinking?
We don't have a lot on 3-5, but we are working on it. But thank you for that feedback, and we will definitely note it, and that just gives us even more motivation to develop some more resources for the older grades. We do have a webinar at the end of this week with Dr. Gina Biancarosa. She actually works for the University of Oregon and helped author M-Class. So, and she will be presenting on data and assessment for the upper elementary and middle school grades. So would be a great and useful session to join on Friday if you want some more information about that. All right, let's see. Carlos is adding, the ladder to mastery is one we must climb if we want to allow our students to reach their potential. How may we continue to deepen our understanding of the research and practices in order to better support our teachers? What a great question.
Yeah, I would just say understanding, again, I would kind of point towards research. That's where we need to ground ourselves in what the research is saying. And what are those key components when we think about Scarborough's reading rope and how those are getting integrated as we go into 3-5? And again, making sure students are proficient with those prior precursor skills in order to be continually be successful readers. I would say, Carlos, I'm pointing to lots of research on that one.
Yeah, for sure. Amy.
And I would say ongoing. I love the idea that was recently, proposed and shared in another session, which was called that they started their literacy and advisory committee, like a long-term committee of different tiers of staff within their district that are dedicated to this type of work as well, so that they can then share in the different teacher building teams and school building teams what that research looks like and what that looks like in our programs that we're using in our district.
Yeah. Okay. Can you define a bit more what you mean by universal screening data? Very broad question.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say universal screeners are like formative assessments. Many of them, if we go back to like the very opening of our presentation today, and there is a hyperlink within that talks about the states that have universal screeners. They are mainly criterion-based measures. Most states, by looking at the map and the current state of the union, will let you know, like, hey, we've done our research at the state level, and these are the ones that we support that are grounded in the science of reading and are evidence-based, trusted, research-based screeners to utilize. So they're typically short assessments that take maybe 5 to 10 minutes to assess each child. And they will give you a high level dip of like who's at risk for reading difficulties and who's reading proficiently. So it's kind of like a toothpick and a cupcake. Is it baked or not baked? Can I read? Can I not read? And where? And then the beauty of that would be that it would have literacy skills broken down into buckets so that you can see where some of those strengths that students have or some of the challenges that they have that we can help support them by giving them the instruction they need. So universal screeners will vary. There's many of them out there. Formative assessments, they don't take very long. They really give us a high level, at risk, not at risk for reading.
Awesome. All right. We think we have time for just a couple more. What might you say to parents who think it isn't important that their child isn't moving forward in reading at about the K2 grade levels, who think that reading at this age is too young? Any research you can point to help explain the importance of reading at these early ages?
Well, I think my first, maybe my first resource is the National Reading Panel. It's heavy, but that's critical. Like what students know. I would also say, wow, there's a lot out there. Tim Shanahan talks about this. Like Louisa Moats talks about this. David Kilpatrick. I mean, I could go on and on. Like there's a lot of research about why it's important and how the brain develops and why these are critical years actually. And the entry part of K1-2 of teaching kids how to learn to read and how their brains are ready to take that on. And the research shows us that like if students aren't reading at grade level, I want to by like middle of year, first grade, like the gap oftentimes gets bigger versus shrinking the gap. Yeah, it's definitely a critical part. I would even say, you know what, share the primers, share the science of there's a lot of good stuff in some of these free resources today that parents could easily access as well, just to talk about how students learn to read, right? And how early they can pick up these skills.
Exactly.
And I saw lots of comments in the chat, like, wow, it gets harder, the gap gets bigger, like so critical. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. Leanne is asking, I'm confused about the idea of receiving all 3 tiers of intervention. Back when RTI was born, I was taught that all students would receive tier 1, then depending on what students needed or which percentile they fell into, that they would decide if they needed tier 2 or tier 3. I was always told that intervening at different points could backfire and confuse the students. If a student is receiving both tier 2 and tier 3, are you assuming that they are receiving the same interventions, just increasing the frequency and duration?
So first, great question. Let's clarify this. Everyone gets tier 1 instruction. Some students may need tier 1 plus small group. And then the additional tiers of instruction should be oftentimes focused on reinforcing the core. And then that tier 3 is filling in the gaps. Like if we're a 3rd grader and I still have phonemic awareness or early phonics to fill in, that is really explicit, systematic, direct teacher-led instruction, oftentimes very small groups of students, like 2 or 3. Sometimes it needs to be one-on-one. That's always not possible. But some students will receive all 3 tiers of instruction depending on their literacy gaps. And I would say tier 2 oftentimes supports and reinforces tier 1 skills. They're not that far off from reading on grade level. And tier 3 is like that big, I'm filling in that gap with explicit, systematic instruction. And they can also, in general, like scheduling can be a problem with getting to all 3 tiers, but it's critical. It's critical that we work all those components out within our, I think about that framework slide of working together, because our students are our destination here.
Great answer, Sarah. And then one last question that I saw way earlier in the chat, like more towards the beginning of the webinar. What happens if your RTI triangle is flipped? So you have most of your students needing that tier 3 intervention.
It is a call to action. You're in the right space this week. Thinking about that. But yeah, that's a hard one. It takes years to overcome that. And I would just say thinking about I'm going to go back to MTSS. Preventative, proactive, and all students would then need like the different tiers of instructions. And I've seen different models of that, meaning the support staff come in and push in. So like instead of sending students out for tier 2 or tier 3, we're all pushing into classrooms to support that. But I would also say monitoring and reevaluating what we're doing with our practices. Are we grounded in the science of reading? Are we utilizing programs that are grounded in the evidence of the science of reading? Because that's like, if we're using like balanced literacy strategies and programs, that's debunked. That's not going to work, and we're going to have a flip model. But if we've made the shift and we are using our data to drive instruction, again for MTSS, and then we have the science of reading trainings and our programs are grounded in that evidence, you'll come out of that. You can definitely come out of that. But you have lots, that's a big elephant to tackle. And I would say looking at through the lens of all those components there would be critical.
I think that's a really great place to end this webinar. You know, so much positive feedback on this, Sarah. People really love this. So we'll have to have you back. Thank you all for joining. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions, but we do have a log of the Q&A, so we will have Sarah reach out to you directly with answers. But thank you so much, and look out for an email with all the resources shared coming, and the slides and the recording and your certificate of attendance coming tomorrow. And make sure to register for the other webinars. Yep.
Thank you for all you do. And thank you for spending an hour with us today. Thank you so much.
Thanks all. Have a great day.